Min Choi was among Nigeria's wealthiest men, but he disguised himself as a street vendor and spent 3 months living in a cramped room in Yaba, Lagos. Nobody suspected anything. Not the business executives who brushed past his makeshift stand each morning. Not the fashionable couples who walked by carrying shopping bags from the palms, and certainly not the woman who would eventually become his wife. Min was 33 years old, controlling more wealth than most Nigerians could fathom. He was the founder and CEO of Choi Tech Solutions, one of West Africa's fastest-growing software companies, with offices spanning from Lagos to Accra. He owned a luxury apartment in Ikoyi with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic, drove cars that turned heads on Azumba Mbadu Avenue, and wore watches that cost more than some people's annual salaries. He possessed everything except what he desperately craved: authenticity, genuine human connection, someone who could see Min the person, not Min the millionaire. His awakening arrived 6 months earlier when his fiancée left him. She didn't leave for another man precisely, though there was another man involved, an American investor with deeper pockets and connections to Silicon Valley funding rounds. She hadn't even attempted to soften the blow with romantic excuses. Her exact words still echoed in his mind like a bad song on repeat. Your money opened doors in Nigeria, but his money opens doors everywhere else. That statement shattered something fundamental inside him. Min was finished with the pretense, finished with wondering who genuinely cared about him versus who simply orbited his wealth like planets around the sun. So he made an outrageous decision. He contacted his business partner, instructed him to handle operations, and walked away from his carefully constructed life. He exchanged his custom-tailored suits for worn clothes purchased from Katangua Market, bought supplies to start a small street business, and vanished into the bustling anonymity of Lagos. No bodyguards trailing 10 paces behind, no platinum credit cards, no smartphone connecting him to his empire. Just him, a wooden table for selling phone accessories and charging services, and one burning question. Would anyone in this massive, indifferent city treat him with basic human dignity if they believed he possessed nothing? For 3 solid months, the answer remained a resounding no. People rushed past his corner near Yaba bus stop, as if he were merely part of the urban landscape. Some tossed coins onto his table without glancing up from their phones. A few stopped to haggle aggressively over prices, treating him like an obstacle to overcome rather than a person to engage. One young woman even used his location as a landmark when directing her Uber driver. Yes, you see that man selling chargers near the yellow building. Stop there. Min had almost accepted that his experiment proved humanity's worst qualities when she changed everything. It happened near midnight during Harmattan season, the dry wind making the December air unexpectedly cold for Lagos. A young woman in a pharmacy uniform approached his spot where he sat on an old plastic chair, his table already packed away for the night. She was Nigerian with rich, dark skin and her hair braided into a neat crown. Most importantly, she was actually looking at him. Not through him, not past him, but directly at him with genuine attention in her eyes. Good evening, she said in Yoruba first, then switched to English. You're here very late, have you eaten? Min hand, which had been organizing his scattered phone chargers, went completely still. In 3 months of invisibility, literally nobody had asked him a personal question beyond, how much for this charger? I'll manage, he responded carefully, making his accent rougher, more street than the polished English he typically spoke in boardrooms. She smiled, tired lines visible around her eyes, but the warmth in that expression felt like sunlight after months of shade. She extended a plastic bag toward him. I work at the pharmacy down the road. My shift just ended, and we were going to dispose of this meat pie and Fanta. It seems wrong to waste food when someone might appreciate it. Please take it. He stared at that plastic bag as if it contained gold bars rather than simple food. Sister, you don't need to do this. I know I don't need to, but it's late, it's cold, and everyone deserves kindness. She placed the bag on his table. My name is Zainab. I pass here every night after closing the shop. Michael, he offered softly, using an English name rather than his distinctly Korean given name that might trigger recognition among Nigeria's business community. Thank you. She waved off his gratitude as if it meant nothing and began walking toward the main road. Then she paused, turning back with that same warm smile. I close every night around this time. I'll check on you tomorrow, make sure you're doing okay. Min nodded, not trusting his voice to remain steady. She smiled once more and disappeared into the Lagos night, her pharmacy uniform visible only briefly under the yellow streetlights before the darkness swallowed her. Just like that, for the first time in 3 months of deliberate poverty, someone had acknowledged his humanity. The following night at midnight precisely, Zainab returned. She brought him another meat pie, this time still warm, and a bottle of cold Maltina. But instead of simply dropping off food and leaving, she sat down on an empty crate near his spot. Not invasively close, but near enough for conversation. "What did you do before this?" she asked, gesturing at his modest setup of phone accessories. "I mean, were you always in the charging business?" "I worked in offices once," he said vaguely. "Corporate work, but I couldn't handle the stress anymore." All technically truthful, just strategically incomplete. She nodded with understanding rather than judgment. Then she began talking about her own day, about a rude customer who'd yelled at her for not having a specific medication in stock. About her mother who still lived in their family compound in Ibadan. About her dreams of eventually opening her own pharmacy someday when she'd saved enough capital. "My father was Korean," Zainab explained, pulling her sweater tighter against the Harmattan wind. "He worked for a manufacturing company in Lagos, met my mother at a church program. He died when I was 14 and my mother raised me alone after that. Nigeria isn't always easy for people who look different, you know. Mixed heritage, non-traditional appearance. People always have questions, always making assumptions." Minjun understood that feeling more intimately than she could possibly know. Being invisible for entirely different reasons, but invisible nonetheless. This became their established routine, every night. Midnight sharp, Zainab would finish her pharmacy shift and stop by his corner near Yaba bus stop. Sometimes she brought food, occasionally just drinks, but always she brought conversation. She told him about her ex-boyfriend Tund, whom she dated for nearly 4 years. How he worked as a manager at a car dealership in Ikja and kept promising marriage was coming soon, but something had felt wrong recently, felt off in ways she couldn't articulate. Minjun listened carefully and asked thoughtful questions. He shared edited versions of his own history, that he'd once worked in the technology sector but experienced burnout. All completely true, merely missing the detail about founding a multi-million-dollar company. These midnight conversations in Yaba became the most authentic interactions Minjun had experienced in years, possibly in his entire adult life. Zainab wanted nothing from him, couldn't want anything from him because she believed he possessed nothing. She simply saw another human being and decided that person deserved basic dignity and kindness. For the first time since beginning this social experiment, Minjun wasn't certain if he was still testing humanity's capacity for compassion, or if he was simply falling deeply in love with someone he could never truly have. Not without destroying the foundation their entire relationship was built upon. Then everything shifted one night in early December. Zainab appeared at midnight as always, but something was fundamentally wrong. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Her hands trembled as she sat down on the crate beside him and simply broke down in tears. "Sister Zainab, what happened?" Minjun asked, genuine concern flooding through him. "Are you all right?" She shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face and catching the yellow streetlight. "I went to surprise Tund at the dealership today during my lunch break. I brought him food because he'd been so distant lately and I thought maybe work stress was affecting him." Her voice cracked like breaking glass. "I found him in his office with my cousin Amaka kissing her." Minjun's jaw tightened involuntarily. "Your cousin?" "Yes, my cousin who has always treated me like I embarrassed the family. Who makes comments about my hair, my mixed heritage, my job, everything about me. The one who acts like I'm beneath her." Zainab wiped her eyes roughly with the back of her hand. "And Tun just looked at me so casually and said I wasn't enough for him anymore. That Amaka's family has better connections and money, and I'm just a pharmacy worker who will never amount to anything significant." "He's a complete fool," Minjun said quietly but firmly. She laughed, but it carried no humor, only bitterness and pain. "Maybe he is, but perhaps he's not wrong either. 4 years in Lagos, working constantly, and what do I really have? A single room in a shared apartment, a job that barely covers expenses, and a mother back in Ibadan I can't even support properly." She buried her face in her hands. "And the absolute worst part, my mother already paid for the wedding venue. She's been saving for years from her small provisions shop. The deposit is non-refundable. She's going to be absolutely heartbroken when I tell her everything is cancelled." Minjun sat in silence, watching this woman who'd shown him extraordinary kindness for months absolutely crumble over a man who clearly didn't deserve even a fraction of her goodness. An idea crystallized in his mind, a completely insane, impulsive, absolutely reckless idea that made no rational sense whatsoever. "Marry me," he said. Zainab's head snapped up so fast he heard her neck crack. "What did you just say?" "Marry me temporarily," Minjun elaborated, turning to face her directly. "Your mother already invested money in a wedding. Your family is expecting one, so let's give them exactly that. We get married, maintain the arrangement quietly for several months, then divorce amicably after things settle down. Your mother doesn't lose her savings. You don't face humiliation from your family. And he paused significantly. I get to help the only person in this entire city who has treated me like I actually matter as a human being. Zainab was staring at him as if he'd completely lost his sanity. You live on the street selling phone chargers. No offense, but how would that even remotely work? I have some resources I haven't mentioned, he said carefully, deliberately vague. I can clean myself up presentably. And honestly, what do you really have to lose? The alternative is calling your mother and breaking her heart while losing money she desperately needs. Zainab studied him for an extended moment. Then she started laughing, that slightly unhinged laugh people produce when circumstances become so absurd they somehow circle back around to making sense. This is completely insane. Absolutely mad. You would genuinely do this for me. You brought me food every night for months when you could barely afford to feed yourself properly, Minjun said simply. Yes, I would absolutely do this for you. She remained quiet for a while, just staring out at the sparse midnight traffic on the main road. Finally, she turned back toward him with decision crystallizing in her eyes. All right then, okay, let's do it. Let's actually get married. 3 days later, they stood in Ikoi registry in front of a registrar who appeared deeply skeptical of the entire situation. Minjun had cleaned up substantially without revealing his true identity. His business partner had discreetly provided clothes that appeared decent but not expensive. He'd gotten a proper haircut and shaved carefully. He looked presentable and respectable, just not billionaire CEO presentable. The registrar asked Zainab 4 separate times if she was being coerced or forced into this marriage. Nobody is forcing me, Zainab stated firmly each time. I am choosing to marry Michael. This is completely my decision. The registrar shrugged with obvious disapproval, clearly expecting them back in 6 months for divorce proceedings, and stamped their marriage certificate with bureaucratic efficiency. Just like that, Minjun Choi, technology millionaire and CEO, was legally married to Zainab Okafor, pharmacy assistant, and she remained absolutely clueless about who he really was. They returned to Zainab's accommodation after the brief ceremony. One room in a shared apartment in Seoul, barely larger than Minjun's walk-in closet back in his Ikoi penthouse, with a bathroom so cramped you practically had to stand sideways to use the sink properly. You should take the mattress, Zainab said quickly, nervous energy radiating from her. I can manage on the floor perfectly fine. Absolutely not happening. I'll take the floor. They debated this for nearly 15 minutes before Minjun finally grabbed a wrapper and created a sleeping space on the floor near the window. It remained significantly more comfortable than his previous 3 months on the street, so he genuinely wasn't complaining. Living together proved surprisingly uncomplicated. Zainab worked night shifts, giving Minjun the apartment to himself during evening hours. He would carefully slip out to meet his business partner, review company operations, ensure everything continued running smoothly. Then he'd return before Zainab came home around 1 in the morning and pretend he'd been there all along. During daylight hours when they were both awake, they developed a comfortable rhythm. Zainab would prepare breakfast, usually something simple like yam and eggs or bread and tea. Minjun would handle cleanup and repair things around the apartment that were broken, the fan that wobbled dangerously, the door that constantly stuck, the window that wouldn't close properly. Zainab kept asking where he'd learned to fix things with such skill, and he would simply shrug and claim he'd picked up various skills over the years. They watched television together, mostly Nollywood films that Zainab loved. She would explain cultural references he pretended not to fully understand. He would sketch in his notebook while she studied pharmacy examination materials, trying to pass certification tests that would qualify her for better positions. Why do you even need that certification? Minjun asked one afternoon, watching her struggle through dense medical terminology. Your knowledge is already impressive. Impressive isn't sufficient, Zainab replied without looking up from her textbook. I need exceptional. I need credentials and certificates if I want anyone in this country to take me seriously, if I want any chance at a better position than pharmacy assistant earning minimum wage. He observed her hunched over that textbook, so absolutely determined to prove her worth in a society that had never adequately valued her. Something twisted painfully in his chest. This woman deserved absolutely everything good the world could offer. And here he sat, lying to her fundamentally every single day about who he actually was. He attempted to tell her the truth multiple times. Repeatedly he would start forming the words. Zainab, there's something important I need to explain about myself. Hold that thought, this customer is shouting at me on the phone. She'd take a work call and the opportunity would evaporate, so I should probably mention that I'm actually... Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I have to call my mother immediately. She's panicking about wedding arrangements and decorations. And she would rush off to handle family drama. The complete truth is I'm not exactly what I appear. Michael, wait, I need to say something first. I don't care about your past, whatever happened before, whatever circumstances you're escaping from. None of it matters to me at all. You've been nothing except kind and honest in your actions toward me. That's all I need to know about who you are. She would smile at him with such complete trust that his confession would die unspoken in his throat. How do you confess deception to someone who just specifically praised your honesty as your defining virtue? 1 month passed, then 6 weeks. And somewhere buried in all those late-night conversations and shared meals and quiet morning routines, something fundamental shifted between them. Zainab would laugh at his jokes, and he'd feel it physically in his chest like warmth spreading. She'd fall asleep on their small couch during a film, and he'd carefully cover her with a wrapper and simply watch her peaceful face for several minutes. She started referring to him as her husband to co-workers, not as a joke or pretense, but like she genuinely meant it. And he'd experienced this surge of emotion he couldn't adequately name or categorize. This arrangement wasn't fake anymore, not for him certainly. Then one evening in mid-December, Zainab's phone rang, her mother calling from Ibadan. Good evening, Mama, Zainab answered, her English becoming more formal as it always did with her mother. She listened briefly, then her face went absolutely pale. Wait, what are you saying, this Christmas? But Mama, that's only 2 weeks away. Minjun glanced up from his sketchbook, immediately concerned. Zainab covered her phone's microphone. My mother invited us home to Ibadan for Christmas. She wants to meet you properly. She's already informed the entire extended family about our wedding and is planning a big introduction. All right, Minjun said slowly, processing implications. Then we'll go to Ibadan. You don't understand my family dynamics. Zainab looked genuinely stressed now. My aunt will be there. My aunt who literally measures every person's value by their bank account balance. My cousin Amaka who already thinks I'm the family disgrace. And obviously Tund will probably attend too, because of course he will, because he's officially with Amaka now. Then we'll show them you're doing perfectly fine, Minjun said with complete calmness. Michael, with all due respect, but you, she stopped, looking profoundly uncomfortable. I look like a street vendor, he finished for her without offense. I understand, and it's accurate observation. I didn't mean it like that. It's fine and it's true. He set down his sketchbook deliberately. Zainab, I will clean up properly. I'll borrow appropriate clothes. I'll be respectful to your family, but I need you to trust me on something important here. Can you do that for me? She studied his face for an extended moment, searching for something in his expression. Then she nodded slowly. Okay, I trust you. He desperately needed to tell her the complete truth before they reached Ibadan. He absolutely, critically needed to confess everything. He didn't. 2 weeks later they boarded a bus heading toward Ibadan. Minjun had discreetly informed his business partner of his exact location, just as a precaution. He'd cleaned up even further, wearing borrowed clothes that appeared respectable but not wealthy. He'd practiced appearing humble and unassuming. Everything would be manageable. Zainab remained a bundle of nervous energy throughout the entire journey. My aunt Ngozi is going to judge absolutely everything, she repeated for perhaps the 15th time, and Amaka is definitely bringing Tund just to humiliate me publicly, and my mother will be so excited to meet you, but then she'll realize that you're... She stopped again mid-sentence. Poor, Minjun supplied the word calmly. I was going to say different from her expectations, Zainab corrected quietly. She's traditional in her thinking. She wanted me to marry someone established and successful, someone who could provide security and comfort. Instead I'm bringing... She trailed off, appearing miserable. A street vendor you married out of sympathy. Minjun kept his voice deliberately light, though something strung deeply in his chest. No, God, absolutely not, Zainab said emphatically. I didn't marry you from sympathy or pity, Michael. I married you because you're genuinely kind and you actually listen when I speak and you see me as a complete person. Because in 3 months you've treated me with more respect and consideration than Tund managed in 4 years. She gazed out the bus window at passing scenery. I wish I could give my mother what she's always wanted, a son-in-law she could feel genuinely proud of. She will be proud, Minjun said quietly but with complete certainty. Trust me on this. When they arrived in Ibadan as evening approached, Christmas decorations were visible everywhere throughout the neighborhood. Colored lights adorned houses, making the modest compounds glow warmly against the darkening sky. Zainab's mother lived in a small but well-maintained house near Bodija, traditional Yoruba-style architecture with a neat garden cultivated in front. The door burst open before they could even knock. Zainab. Her mother was a petite Nigerian woman with greying hair and the exact same warm smile as her daughter. She pulled Zainab into a crushing embrace, then turned toward Minjun with excited, curious eyes. "And you must be Michael. Come inside, come inside. You'll catch cold standing out there." The house interior was warm and smelled like jollof rice and some kind of stew, aromatic fusion of Nigerian cooking. Zainab's mother fussed over both of them extensively, serving food and asking countless questions about their life in Lagos. She was genuinely kind though, warmly welcoming. Minjun could observe exactly where Zainab had inherited her compassionate heart. "I'm so happy she found you," Zainab's mother said to Minjun in Yoruba, then repeated in English. "She always chose men who never appreciated her properly, but I can see it clearly in your eyes when you look at her. You truly see my daughter." Minjun swallowed hard. "Yes, Ma, I absolutely do." That night they slept in Zainab's childhood bedroom. For the first time, Minjun insisted they share the small bed because her mother would find it strange if he slept on the floor. "I'll stay on my side completely," he promised. "I know you will," Zainab said, and something unreadable colored her voice. "Michael," Zainab whispered into the darkness. "Yes, thank you for doing this, for coming here, for helping me face my family, for everything. You don't need to thank me for anything." "I do though because she paused significantly. "Never mind, good night. Good night, Zainab." The following evening was Christmas Eve, and the extended family gathering was scheduled at an upscale restaurant in a newer part of Ibadan, approximately 40 minutes away. Zainab was stress-eating biscuits throughout the afternoon, nervous energy radiating from her constantly. "Everything will be fine," Minjun kept reassuring her. "You don't know my family," she muttered darkly. They arrived at the restaurant precisely at 7. It was one of those expensive establishments with mood lighting and obvious dress codes posted at the entrance. Minjun wore the nicest borrowed clothes available to him, but they remained obviously inexpensive. Zainab wore a simple but pretty dress, nothing elaborate or costly. Her aunt Ngozi had already arrived, absolutely dripping in expensive designer clothing and accessories. Beside her sat Amaka, Zainab's cousin, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Zainab's monthly salary, and sitting directly across from them with a smug expression plastered on his face was Tund. "Zainab," Aunt Ngozi's voice carried across the entire restaurant space. "You actually came, and this must be your husband." The way she pronounced husband made it sound like an accusation. "Good evening, Aunt Ngozi," Zainab responded stiffly. "This is Michael." "Charming," Amaka said in a tone meaning the complete opposite. "Tund, doesn't he look strangely familiar, like that vendor who sells things near Zainab's pharmacy?" Tund squinted at Minjun critically and then laughed loudly. "Oh my God, it actually is him. Zainab, did you seriously marry the street vendor?" The entire table descended into uncomfortable silence. Zainab's face flushed with humiliation and shame. "He's not," she started defending him. "Oh honey, there's absolutely no shame in charity work," Aunt Ngozi said with transparently fake sympathy. "Though actually marrying them seems rather extreme, don't you think? What does he even do for proper employment?" "I'm between jobs currently," Minjun answered calmly, evenly. Amaka nearly choked on her wine. "Between jobs, that's just code language for unemployed. Tund, you absolutely dodged a bullet escaping this family." "I really did," Tund agreed smugly. "No offense, Zainab, but you aimed catastrophically low. I mean, just look at yourself. Still wearing the same cheap clothes, same dead-end pharmacy job, and now married to someone who literally sells things on the street corner. It's actually sad." Zainab's mother stood up firmly. "That is absolutely enough. You will not speak to my daughter this way." "Oh please, Auntie, these aren't insults, they're just facts," Aunt Ngozi said dismissively. "Zainab has always been the family disappointment, went to Lagos with big dreams, works a nothing job and marries a street vendor. Meanwhile, Amaka is engaged to an assistant manager at one of the biggest companies in all of Nigeria." "Assistant regional manager," Tund corrected, puffing himself up importantly. "At Choi Tech Solutions." Minjun's eyebrow twitched slightly, but he said absolutely nothing. "Choi Tech Solutions," Aunt Ngozi practically crowed with pride. "One of the most successful technology companies in West Africa. That's the caliber of man you should have married, Zainab, someone with genuine ambition, with real prospects and future potential. Not," she waved dismissively at Minjun. "This." Zainab was physically shaking now from anger or shame or both. Minjun couldn't definitively tell. "I think," he started to say something. "You think?" Amaka laughed cruelly. Does thinking hurt? Because honestly, it's quite obvious you don't exercise that ability very often. That's precisely when the headlights appeared outside the restaurant's large windows. Bright, impossibly bright, multiple sets of powerful lights. A convoy of black luxury SUVs pulled up outside, expensive enough that everyone in the restaurant turned to stare. The doors opened and men in sharp black suits emerged, the kind of professional security detail that only extremely important people employ. The restaurant entrance opened, and a man in an expensive tailored suit walked in purposefully, bowing deeply with respect. "Chairman Choi," he announced in a loud, crystal-clear voice that carried throughout the entire space. "We've been searching everywhere for you, sir. The emergency board meeting has been moved up to tonight. They need your presence immediately." The entire restaurant descended into absolute silence. Tun's face had drained of all colour. Aunt Ngozie's mouth was literally hanging open. Amaka had frozen completely with her wine glass suspended halfway to her lips. Min-jun stood up slowly, his entire demeanour transforming. Gone was the quiet, humble vendor who'd been absorbing insults for 30 minutes. His posture straightened to full height, his expression hardening into something commanding and powerful, someone clearly accustomed to boardrooms and million-dollar negotiations. "Thank you, David," he responded in perfect, unaccented English. His voice had dropped its rough street edges, becoming the authoritative voice of someone who regularly makes decisions affecting thousands of people. "I'll be there very shortly. So the vehicles are ready whenever you are," David said, still maintaining his respectful bow. Tund made a strangled, choking sound. "Chairman Choi, you can't possibly be." Min-jun turned toward him with an expression of mild, detached interest. "I'm sorry, do I know you personally?" I work for you, sir. I'm Tunda Debyo, Assistant Regional Manager at the Lagos office." "Oh right, the assistant manager," Min-jun's tone was absolutely ice-cold. "The one who's been dating my wife's cousin after betraying my wife, how interesting." "Your wife," the word emerged as barely a squeak. Min-jun ignored him completely and turned to Zainab, his expression softening immediately and dramatically. He reached into his jacket and extracted a small black velvet box. When he opened it, a diamond ring caught the restaurant's lighting, the kind of ring that obviously cost more than most people's annual salaries. He lowered himself to one knee right there in the middle of the restaurant floor. "Zainab," he said gently, voice filled with emotion, 3 months ago you encountered a man sitting on a street corner and decided he deserved basic human kindness. Food, conversation, dignity, humanity. You didn't know I was conducting an experiment, testing this city to see if anyone could see past money and status to just see me as a person. You did exactly that. You saw me when I possessed nothing. You married me when you believed I was nobody. You've treated me with more genuine respect and care than anyone has shown me in my entire adult life." Tears were streaming down Zainab's face now, unchecked. "So I'm asking you now in front of everyone here with absolutely no more secrets between us. Will you stay married to me? Not from obligation, not to save face or help your mother, but because I have fallen completely and utterly in love with you, and I want to spend every remaining day of my life proving I deserve the extraordinary kindness you showed a stranger on the street." Zainab was crying openly now, that kind of crying where you can't breathe properly and your entire face contorts. "You're a complete idiot," she sobbed. "Is that a yes?" "Yes, you absolute idiot. Yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood up, pulling her into a kiss right there in the middle of the restaurant while absolutely everyone stared in complete shock. When they separated, Min-jun kept his arm protectively around Zainab and turned to address the table. "Tund," he said with pleasant, deadly politeness. "You're terminated. Security will escort you from the building Monday morning." Tund made a sound like a dying animal. "Amaka and Aunt Ngozi, thank you for the illuminating dinner conversation. It was extremely educational." His voice dripped with cold, calculated politeness. "Zainab's mother, I sincerely apologize for the deception. I wanted to understand who my wife's family truly was before revealing myself. I can clearly see now that Zainab's extraordinary kindness came from you, not from everyone seated at this table." Zainab's mother was still sitting in shock, but a smile was beginning to spread across her face. "Now if you'll excuse us," Min-jun said, guiding Zainab toward the exit, "we have a board meeting to attend." "Oh, and the bill for tonight's dinner is completely on me. Merry Christmas to everyone." They walked out of that restaurant hand in hand while Aunt Ngozie's jaw remained on the floor. Outside in the warm Ibadan evening with the security detail waiting professionally by the vehicles, Zainab finally found her voice. "You're really him, Min-jun Choi, the actual Min-jun Choi who founded Choi Tech. I tried telling you, he said softly, so many times, I genuinely tried. That's why you could fix everything in my apartment so expertly, why you spoke such perfect English. Why you always seemed so, not like a street vendor. Yes, she hit his arm hard. You let me bring you meat pies and Fanta for 3 solid months. Your meat pies were honestly the best food I'd eaten in years, he said with complete honesty, because they came with you with your presence and kindness. She hit him again, but she was laughing through the tears now. I cannot believe this situation. I actually married a millionaire. No, Min-jun said, turning to face her completely. You married a man on a street corner who possessed absolutely nothing. That's who I was when you fell in love with me. The money, the company, the success, all of that is just external things. What truly matters is that you saw me. Really, genuinely saw me as a person. When everyone else in this city looked through me or walked past me, you stopped and saw me. Zainab was crying again, softer now. I did see you. I saw someone genuinely kind who created beautiful sketches and actually listened when I talked and made me laugh when I felt sad and lonely. That's who I fell in love with, that person. Even though I deceived you about my circumstances, you didn't lie about who you fundamentally are, she said firmly, decisively. You lied about what you possess materially. Those are completely different things. The man I know, the man I married, he's real, correct. The most real I've ever been in my entire life, Min-jun promised. She kissed him again, gentler this time, more tender. When she pulled back, she was actually smiling. So exactly how wealthy are we talking here? Like, can we afford to eat at restaurants without checking prices first? He actually laughed, something he genuinely hadn't done in years before meeting her. Zainab, we could buy this entire restaurant if we wanted to. Oh my God. She stared at the diamond ring on her finger, really examined it properly for the first time. This ring probably costs more than my entire room in Seoul. About 5 times more actually. She made a strangled sound, then started laughing, that same slightly hysterical laugh from months ago. My mother is absolutely going to faint when we tell her everything. Should we inform her tonight? No, Zainab decided firmly. Let her enjoy her revenge fantasies about Aunt Ngozie's face for one more night. We'll explain everything properly tomorrow morning. They stood there in the warm evening for another moment, just looking at each other with complete understanding. For the record, Zainab said quietly, seriously, I would have stayed married to you even if you really were just a street vendor. I fell for you over cheap meat pies and midnight conversations about life. This, she gestured at the luxury vehicles and security detail. This is just an absolutely insane bonus. Min-jun pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. I know. That's exactly why I love you. They returned to Zainab's mother's house that night, leaving the convoy and security detail behind intentionally. In the morning, Min-jun sat down with Zainab's mother and properly introduced himself, his real self. He explained everything transparently, the test, the disguise, falling genuinely in love with her daughter, all of it. Zainab's mother listened quietly throughout, then said simply, you could have told her the truth much sooner. I know, I was afraid. Afraid of what exactly? That she would see me differently, that I would lose the only genuine connection I'd found in years. Zainab's mother smiled knowingly. My daughter doesn't change how she sees people based on their bank accounts or social status. I raised her better than that, with better values. I know that now, Min-jun said, and I promise to spend the rest of my life proving I deserve her. Good, she said firmly. Then she stood up and embraced him warmly. Welcome to the family properly this time, my son. On Christmas Day, Ibadan was peaceful and warm, the Harmattan haze giving everything a soft, dreamlike quality. Min-jun and Zainab walked through the neighborhood hand in hand, past neighbors who waved and smiled, past the small church where Zainab had attended as a child, past the community center where she'd learned to speak Yoruba fluently growing up. What happens now? Zainab asked, squeezing his hand. Now we return to Lagos, Min-jun said. I go back to the company officially. We move out of your single room into somewhere more spacious if you want, though honestly, I genuinely liked that room in Seoul. Because it was cramped and the fan barely worked. Because you were there, and that made it feel like home. She rolled her eyes, but she was smiling broadly. You're incredibly cheesy. You like it though. Unfortunately, yes, I really do. They walked further, the red dust of Ibadan streets coating their shoes. Min-jun, Zainab said quietly, testing his real name on her tongue. Yes. Thank you for choosing me for that experiment, for sitting on that corner where I could find you, for being patient while I processed my feelings. For making me feel visible and valued, when I've spent my whole life feeling invisible in this country. He stopped walking completely and turned to face her directly. Zainab, you were never invisible. You're the brightest presence in any room, any space you occupy. Everyone else was simply too blind or too self-absorbed to see it properly. She kissed him there in the dusty street on Christmas Day in the neighborhood where she'd grown up, with neighbors watching and smiling from behind curtains and compound gates. And somewhere in Lagos, Tund was packing up his office belongings while security personnel watched. Amaka was fielding uncomfortable calls from relatives who'd heard about the restaurant incident. Aunt Ngozi was attempting to explain to her husband how she'd accidentally humiliated one of Nigeria's wealthiest men. But in Yaba at Minjun's old corner near the bus stop, his sketches were still there, protected by plastic sheeting he'd carefully arranged, including one portrait he'd drawn and never shown Zainab. A portrait of a woman with extraordinarily kind eyes and a warm, tired smile bringing food to a stranger in the middle of the night. The sketch was dated 3 months earlier, from the very first night they'd met. And written at the bottom in small, careful letters was a note he'd made to himself that night. Today I met someone who genuinely sees people as people. I think I might love her. He'd been absolutely right in that instinct. And now, 3 months later, he got to love her authentically. No disguises, no social experiments, no more sleeping on street corners. Just him and her and a future filled with midnight conversations and simple meat pies, and the kind of profound happiness that money could never purchase, never manufacture, never replicate. Because real love, the kind that sees you when you have nothing, that values you when the world overlooks you, that chooses you when choosing you makes no logical sense, that kind of love is priceless. And Minjun Choi, who could buy almost anything in the world, had finally found the one thing money couldn't buy. Someone who loved him not for what he had, but for who he was when he had nothing at all.